as I mentioned before, one of the things that my choir does really well is ringing chords together. And part of that I attribute to the fact that I got them green. They didn't have any bad habits when I got them, so I got to teach them the what I would consider correct, the way that we do ringing techniques through the organization, the certification process. I was able to teach them ringing techniques from day one. So that was really helpful to be able to influence them from the beginning. Uh, and it maybe sound like something really silly, but I really do pride myself on the fact that they ring chords really together, because so many pieces start with maybe a few bells or maybe a few chords and definitely end with chords typically. And I think especially when you're playing the smaller group music, the 12 bells and so forth, there tends to be a lot more um, exposed areas, can I say. You're not you're not so showy as far as you're not doing a lot of really heavy ringing, really fast ringing, really intricate stuff. A lot of it tends to be simpler, and when it's simpler, it tends to be more exposed. So you can hear those chords that aren't together a little bit more easily than you do in some, 7 octave fast running piece, whatever. Um, so so I think it's important for them to have that basic skill of being able to ring together. So there are several things that I think need to happen to be able to ring together. And especially now in socially distancing, it makes it more difficult because we're spread out. The typical thing is when you want the chords to ring together, you often hear say, watch each other or whatever. Use your peripheral vision. Well, our peripheral vision just got further away from us, and it makes it more difficult to ring chords. So that's part of the reason why I thought it was important to include that in today's session to help us help our neighbors ring together. So the first thing about ringing together, I think, is having a similar technique. Uh, if you have one person who is ringing really tight, right in their chest, and they have a really tight ring area, that person compared to someone who's very extended and ringing more out to their side kind of thing makes it really hard for them to ring together because they can't anticipate when they're going to actually hit that strike point. If they're all over the map versus really tight, it can be very difficult. So the more similar that their ringing technique is going to help them in ringing chords together. So and just healthy ringing is important anyway. So, um, I don't know if you guys can see these. These are there's a lot of little toys that I use when I'm talking about ringing techniques and so forth. And these are my little bell ringing Lego guys. Bell ringing, the Lego guys have a lot of things that they are going to help us to reinforce with our ringing techniques and teaching them. So there are 3 parts to healthy ringing. And if you take the ringing certification, there's a ton of stuff that we cover and it takes hours. So I'm going to just give you the quick and dirty version. And if you want more information about it or whatever, I'm happy to connect with you and help with this. I'm happy to do a session with your class or with your choir as well, whatever it takes. I am very passionate about healthy ringing. So the first thing is stance. I'm going to actually switch to, well, I'll do it in a few seconds. So the first thing is stance. We've all heard that it's really important that you stand with one foot in front of the other, especially if you are ringing the bigger bells. It doesn't matter so much when you're up in the 7s, but as you get into the 5s and lower, you want to have your center of gravity more centered so that you can move with those bells and use your entire body to help ring them. Um, Again, I'm going to keep it brief. I'm not going into all the details, but one of the things that I teach my ringers is I use a hula hoop. So, the fun way of, especially with kids, can you hula hoop? if you hula hoop, or if you ask them what stance they're going to stand in for hula hooping or surfboarding or martial arts, they are naturally, you know, show me a martial arts stance, show me your surfboard stance, show me your hula hoop stance. Any of those things, they're going to automatically put one foot in front of the other. That's what we want them to do for ringing. Then the next thing is seating the bell. When we seat the bell, we talk about Lego hands. First of all, I got to change. Hang on just a second. I got to change videos so you can see better. There we go. So you see a little bit more of me this way. So the Lego hands are really important. The Lego hands are a U shape. You want your thumb, the space between your thumb and your fingers, to line up with, I can't do this very well backwards, but line up with your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder. So think of your Lego people. They're, you know, they're here, right? They have their Lego hands. And one of the things that I use to reinforce this, if you're having trouble getting with somebody to their hands are too far out to the side, or I had one ringer who tended to ring in. Her bells would end up like this. Mallets can be really helpful. So just as a visual, when I lay a mallet so that the mallet head is between my thumb and finger, it should have a straight line. I think you can see this on the video. It should have a straight line between my thumb, my wrist, and my elbow. I'm going to stop sharing so you guys can see a bigger image, I think. If you're in grid mode, you can go up into the top corner. If you're seeing everybody, you can go up in the top corner and go to speaker view, and then you'll just see me. So you'll see a big image. Anyway, if I can stand up a little bit so you can see that. So here's maybe if I do it that way. So I have my mallet head in between my thumb and my finger, and then I'm lining everything up so that my mallet tail, the handle, is pointed straight to my elbow, and my elbow's in line with my shoulder. That should be the proper ringing technique position to seat the bell, okay? The next thing to do is to take your bell, and I usually take it by holding the handle by my opposite hand that I'm using. The other thing to do is to always teach them starting with their non-dominant hand. So I'm left-handed, so I'm holding this bell in my left hand currently. I'm going to seat it in my right hand. You're going to seat it keeping your Lego fingers, and I would normally have my hand down here, but I want you to be able to see it. So I'm just going to set that in to that Lego hand so it's right in there. And then my fingers just relax. They don't need to be strong. They just need to be relaxed around that. So now my bell is seated. I'm going to adjust this just a little bit so maybe you guys can see. You don't need to see me, you need to see my hands. Okay, so that's better. Now you can see without me having my hand too high. So my forearm is parallel to the ground. Everything's lined up. From the clapper is lined up with my wrist, my elbow, and my shoulder. And my forearm's parallel to the ground. If your ringers have trouble with that, I oftentimes will have them put their hand underneath. James, come in and take a bell. You can demonstrate too. Yep, perfect. So you're seeing him from the side. I'll do the front so that we don't have to keep switching back and forth. So to ring, which is the next step, is to actually initiate a stroke. Lift the bell and relax your 3 fingers. Yep. And the bell is going to naturally fall backwards towards your shoulder. If you can see inside the bell, what that means is your clapper is towards the back of your bell, and so it has room to be able to move forward. That's what we want, is for it to be able to move forward. So we're here. When we bring the bell down and our wrist gets to the palm, we pull those fingers in, and that's going to pull the bell forward, so it's going to execute. without using your wrist or anything else. You can do it with just those fingers. Here, let me give you something that's not so close chromatically so we don't sound so horrible. Okay. And in the PowerPoint, you'll see it has the different parts in it. So you have this in your handout of the stroke. And the stroke is really 3 parts. The 3 parts are I want to stop this. There we go. So the stroke is 3 parts: preparation, and I think of it as a D backwards. Preparation is the lift, and my handle's going to follow. Think of a D going here. This is the D. So this is the front of the D, the round part, and then the flat part at a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to lift to the top of my D, come down. So I'm just following that handle down, and when I get to my forearms parallel to the ground, I use my wrist a little bit there. I'm going to strike it and then follow the front of the D back up to my ready to ring position. A lot of people teach ready to ring here. The problem with that is now you have no place to lift. If you're out here, whether you're parallel or a little bit above parallel, you have a place to lift so you can prep with that bell. And that's going to be really important when we are looking at ringing together. So ringing together, if we have a similar stroke, now we can anticipate. Too much wrist. You need a little more prep. So James is my little guinea pig. So there are a couple different ways that you can help, and obviously we're not social distancing because of we're in a really tight space, but I'm going to move you to that side. There are a couple things that you can do to help your ringers visually cue from a distance. The first thing, and this is in the PowerPoint as well, if at all possible, have them ring in a semicircle or a V or a U, something where they can see one another as well as the director. If at all possible, try and avoid 3 straight lines or however many lines, one behind the other. If James is in front of me and I'm back here, I can't see what he's doing. How am I supposed to ring together with him when I can't see anything that he's doing? Far better if he's in some position where I have a visual connection to him. One of the congregations that we attend on occasion, they have 3 rows on 3 steps, one behind the other, and they can't ring a chord together. Drives me nuts. So if at all possible, semicircle, V or U shape, anything where you can get them so that they have somewhat of visual. L works. It's a flat V. Those things are going to help. The other thing that's going to help is partner exercises. James and I were kind of just doing this, but again, social distancing. No, stay close to me. Pre-social distancing, if I was teaching this, I would have had the class go off as partners and have one person be the leader. So I'm going to make James the leader, and I'm going to try and anticipate when he's going to ring and ring with him. And we're going to repeat that until we're ringing together, and then we'd switch, and I'd become leader and he'd become follower. Okay? And this is where I would also coach them that this is where prep happens. If he's just here doing this, it's really hard for me to anticipate when that stroke's going to happen. I need that prep. It's just like when a director gives you the prep to direct, when they're directing beat 1 or whatever beat, when they give you that prep, that's giving you the, okay, I can be with you. If they just started you here, how would you ever be able to know when to start playing? So I need him to do a solid prep in order for me to be able to track him. Go. too much wrist. Okay, so, and we would probably break in between those, like do it a couple times and then stop and then have him try again. And I wouldn't be correcting his ringing technique while we were doing it. I'm sorry, honey. And then we'd switch. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. With social distancing, that makes it a little bit harder. Something that can help for social distancing, and I do this even before we had to social distance. I have a bunch of these little scarves, and they just need to hold it. It doesn't have to be tight. They just so they don't let go of it, and so it doesn't interfere with their ringing. But having a scarf is going to give them that visual cue. Okay. And this can also help with ringing technique. When I have a couple ringers that tend to ring like this, they just push, and I describe that. If you see that motion, it's like a car wash. I don't want to see a car wash. I want to see movement in that scarf. So I want them to do a prep and follow through. If they're just doing this, they're missing part of the process. They need to prep, strike, and follow through. So a scarf or like a ribbon, I've seen, and I've used this too, like just a wide ribbon that has a loop in it, and then put that ribbon on your pinky finger. So I've done that for processionals. And if you have scarves or ribbons in the appropriate color, you could even do this while you're ringing. It's going to just give a visual cue for your ringers, as well as it could be something interesting for the audience if it's appropriate for the piece that you're playing. So a bag of scarves like this can be really helpful. Okay. The other thing that I do a lot is on like the last chord of a measure, or I mean, last chord of a piece, I will assign someone other than myself for everyone to watch. I will typically pick someone who, first of all, they have to be playing the chord. Second of all, they have to be they have to have a technique that can be tracked. So they have to do a good prep so that the others can follow them. So I need a good leader for ringing technique. And third, someplace where they're visually centralized so that everybody can see them that's participating in that chord. So this may be at a fermata, it may be at the end of the piece there, or even at the beginning of the piece, the very first piece. And as the conductor, I would say, everybody, James is the leader for this chord. Because when you're conducting, when you're directing and doing this, they may not get where the ictus is. It's harder for them to follow this and match when to strike than it is for them to follow someone who's doing the same thing as them to strike together. So I would assign James. James's job is to watch me as the conductor. James, when you are watching me and you strike, hopefully close to where my ictus is, everybody else is watching James. They're cueing off of him. They're going to ring together. So it is one of those times when I'm like, nobody should be watching me. You should all be watching James. Okay. It's counterintuitive for us as conductors to say, don't watch me. But this is one case where I want one person watching me. Everybody else should be watching him or whoever I've assigned. And that may change from two different places in the piece. It may change from piece to piece. Who's that leader for that chord? And I have them write it in their music. Who's the leader for that chord? And they rehearse it that way from the beginning. So when we went through the score study, I will have already decided in my score study, who I need to lead that chord. And I would tell them that from the very first time that they start playing the piece, that, or maybe the second time through that measure, that, hey, on this chord, here's the leader for that chord. Nobody else should be watching me. Once they strike the chord, they may need to look at you for the cutoff, or you may have them still watch that person for the cutoff if it's the end of the piece. The third thing that I would say is, especially related to that, when you're at the end of the piece and you have a chord that everybody's watching, have them memorize that measure. It's a 1 chord. Come on, remember that chord. Do you play on that chord or not? You should probably know. Are you watching James or not? if you're playing that chord, you should be watching James. Pretty straightforward. Again, could be counterintuitive, but it can be very effective because now they'll all ring together because they're watching their leader. It also empowers your ringers because they know that they are in control. And let's see, one other thing. So on this piece that we looked at today, the Come Ye Thankful People Come, you can go. Thank you. I appreciate your help. If you look back at measure 52, that last piece, there's the chord with the fermata, and then there's the eighth note runs over the top. I may tell those eighth note ringers, I'm watching you guys. I don't really need to direct that. You each can play it, follow on one another. You can play that. All I'm going to do is direct the cutoff at that point. So I may let them go. It depends on the piece and what's going on, but especially if there's a retard, I may let them do the retard. Let them feel it, let them do it. If you think they can, it's another empowerment thing for them to be able to do that. A couple of other things related to chords, and that is, if at all possible, this is another, I was dreaming about this the other night. It's another class that I would love to teach, is the science of bells and sound production. I think I'm going to actually switch back to my other video camera because I think we're done demonstrating. Well, maybe not. Okay, so science of bell and sound production, understanding, I was talking earlier about the Doppler effect, understanding things like that of how the bell works, where the sound comes from, how sound waves carry, understanding any of that science is going to help you to have effect. So, and the science of your bell also. So first thing is clapper settings. I have Malmark bells, so making sure that everybody has the same clapper setting or that you've at least made a decision cognitively about where you want those to be set. If half your bell ringers are on soft and half of your bells have their clappers set to hard, it's going to be really difficult for them to match their sound. And it may depend on ringers sometimes. Sometimes medium for one ringer is not the same as medium for another ringer. It may even differ between their dominant and non-dominant hands. So be cognizant of that. Just be aware that if something doesn't, they can't seem to all be getting to soft at the same time, check to make sure that all their clappers are set the same. When we're talking about the sound production and volume, the other thing is the prep that we're doing, how relaxed you are in holding the handle is going to help you determine how loud your bell is. So if you relax it a lot so that it tips back really far, and then you pull it forward, it's going to be fairly loud. If you don't let it tip, if you're holding a little bit tighter so that it doesn't tip back quite as far, it's going to be easier for you to get that softer sound. So think about that. So your loudness, part of it is controlled with your fingers. And then we talked about pushing the sound, doing that to help push the sound forward out to the congregation to help with a crescendo. The other thing is if you have repeated notes, you can stack, what I call stack the sound. So I'm crescendoing, but I have a repeated eighth quarter note. If I have a repeated quarter note on E5, I'm going to stack it by having my first strike here, but instead of going all the way back, I'm going to push the next one here and then build up. So I'm building. It's helping the Doppler effect as well as pushing it. Now I got a little bit high there because I was accentuating that or exaggerating it, but you could do it here. It doesn't have to be much. It just is a little bit of stacking. Instead of doing this so much, you're just stacking the sound up as you go. And you can go forward just a little bit in your circle as you're doing that. The other thing with science and sound production is if you understand that, then you can start to learn a lot of different damping options, which can help your chords. You've done your strike for your chord. Then what happens? Is everybody just sitting there? Are they doing a little bit of a push as a chord? Can be really effective at the end of a piece. Are they doing a little shimmer? Are they striking and then just letting the? I need like about 5 bells. What do I have here? So if they're ringing and then just slowly let it drop to their side and let it ring out, can be really effective. There's shimmer, push. So there's a lot of different things you can do with damping. Are you table damping? It's lots of times the ringers are like, phew, done with the piece. And they just, like they don't think about, yeah, but you're not done. It's just like a conductor. You're not, the piece isn't done until the conductor's hands go to their side. When you're at an orchestra or something. As long as their hands are up, the piece is still going. They may wait and wait and wait before they release and let the instruments release. Same with the bells. You're not done until the final damp has happened and the conductor releases. So those are all key things. I've run through a ton of stuff very quickly. This didn't take quite as long as I thought it was going to, so we finished a little bit early. I'm going to switch back to local and then we can see if there's any questions. You can tell I get excited about this stuff because I start talking really fast. Okay, who has questions or comments on this session? Helpful, not helpful? Anybody learn anything?
I liked what you did with the D, the letter D.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we often teach circles, but it's really not a circle. It's a straight on the back side and then right. A curve to come back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Anybody else?
You mentioned too, ringing in rows instead of, or doing other things instead of that. And the first time we did an outdoor service, we were in 2 rows and I was ringing up front. So they were following me. I was conducting and ringing. But they said, because it was outdoor ringing, especially, they had a hard time hearing one another. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the visual benefit of being in another formation, just being able to hear one another better. So we stopped doing rows after one time.
Yeah, it's huge. The choir, the Holy Cross choir, we always ring in a V or a U shape or something, and we'll try these different techniques that I was showing you at the end. Hey, at the end of this piece, let's do a shimmer or let's do a push, or I want to see what it sounds like when you guys push and then everybody lets it go to their side or hides it behind their music stand or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. We may try 2 or 3 different things and say, oh, that kind of fits with the mood of this piece. So so it's fun to experiment with those damping techniques. Mm-hmm. What else works or doesn't work for y'all? Is there anybody who does actually have to ring in rows?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah. So the way our church is laid out is that there's like a stage in the sanctuary. So I've got, and I don't have, I mean, I have some family members, but they are not next to each other. So I have them spaced in 3 rows, 2 in each row, so they can all see me. But you're absolutely right. It's very hard for them to be able to see the people in front of them and ring chords together. So that's been a challenge.
Yeah. It really is a challenge, and it is surprising how difficult it is for them to find the ictus of the director as well. For them to all strike at the same point by watching one person, it becomes a challenge. It's helpful that they become familiar with you as a conductor, so they kind of know your style and where your ictus is helpful. But working together, it came off of my phone, but I had a thing that says, I had a card holder on the back of my phone that says handbell's the ultimate team sport. It really is a team sport. You can't ring if you don't play as part of the team. It doesn't work. You have to be an ensemble. You have to be a team, and you have to work together as a team. And the way to do that is the best way to do that is to be able to see each other, and as Darcy pointed out, hear each other as well. If you can't hear what's going on, how do you know if you're louder than the melody line? I'm supposed to be icing, but I can't hear cake. Well, cake either has to be louder, or we got to do something so that icing can figure out what they're supposed to do, because they need to at least ring. They can't not ring. It's not an option. What else?
I mean, a lot of times I'm probably ring as much as I direct, I mean, do both. I mean, but a lot of times when I'm conducting, I'll like mimic a ring at cutoffs, so actually, so I'm doing the same thing kind of they're doing. And that seems to be helpful. I know some conductor teachers think you should just conduct them like a normal conductor does and, do this thing, but this seems to work better with a lot of people.
I do a lot of ringing and conducting at the same time as well, and it does get tricky, especially when the bell starts doing this. You're like, well,
I do it a lot too, and sometimes I forget to ring because I'm listening to what's going on. And it's like, oh yeah, that was me. That's why I didn't hear that bell.
Yeah.
And as all things, this session went faster than I thought it would. So wahoo, here we are. What other techniques have you guys tried to help with getting your ringers to ring together?
I think for me, it was just always that prep motion. Or imagine your bell is taking a breath, and take a breath yourself.
Yep. Yeah, with my choir, I use the phrase, breathe in the Holy Spirit, send it out into the world. And the same, that's part of what we're doing as music. You're breathing in the Holy Spirit and you're sending that message out into the world. And that, not just that we're breathing, we're actually doing something with it. You can tell my choir thinks I'm absolutely insane because I'm always coming up with crazy things for I show up with tennis balls and scarves and yo-yos and whatever it takes to. They also dread when I go to national because I come home with new crazy ideas that I can't wait to share.
What's she come up with now?
Exactly. Oh no, she's been to a conference.
Yeah.
But it's good to, and not everything works. You try different things. Some things work really well, some things don't. My hula hoop has basically been retired to home, and I hula hoop on occasion, but I'm not very good at it. But it's fun to try. It's harder to carry it around, so I don't show up with that so often. But I do carry the scarves, and that's been really effective with my ringers to be able to get them to ring together, to give them that visual cue, especially if they're in a line. If they don't have, if they're all kind of in a line, it's harder to see. And now with the social distancing, makes it even more difficult with your peripheral vision to try and see horizontally, especially if you're trying to see horizontally over another ringer to the person you're supposed to be ringing with. The scarves just help put it out there a little bit more in front of them. So, and it also helps them in teaching ringing techniques because you can see it. Like I said, the difference between the car wash motion and the actual getting the motion of the scarf to go as a D, they can see that better in each other and in their own ringing if they use that scarf to help with that. What did you not hear today that you wished you had heard? What topics can we add to the list for future?
My weakness is the whole technology thing about recording. But, you know, that's me. And thankfully, we have a middle school music teacher in our church that has some experience with the technology. So,
Awesome. Yeah, pull in those people as you can.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of conversation about it as well. And you know, Anita reminded us that there's that session today at National about recording, and there's been a lot of talk on Facebook about recording capabilities, especially with bells. They're a little bit tricky because of the overtones and so forth. It's a little tricky to record bells and get the microphones the right distance away so that things meld, but you can still hear them and you don't have a lot of background noise. The other thing is, if you are broadcasting, if you're performing as part of a live broadcast, one of my guy that does the Zoom calls at Holy Cross told me that there is a setting on was it Zoom or was it anyway, whichever recording it was, broadcasting tool he was using, I think it was Zoom, that there's a setting that all those tools, webcast, webinar, what am I trying to say? WebEx, Zoom, Skype, all those broadcasting tools were designed for spoken word. And so they don't deal very well with music a lot of times. And so there is a setting though in Zoom. I have to go back and find my notes on it, but someone told me and I shared it with the guy who does our video that there's a setting in Zoom that music directors, our music teachers, like piano teachers and so forth, they were trying to, at the beginning of COVID, they're trying to do lessons with their kids over Zoom or whatever. And they found that there's a setting that helps improve music across Zoom. And it was because the Zoom is trying to normalize the microphone, and with music, it doesn't do that well without this setting being turned on.
Yeah, and it does help. I mean, we have the first rehearsal we did, we didn't actually record it to use anywhere. We recorded it to figure out how the mics need to be set up, right? And what the soundboard settings had, because we have soundboard and we have complete control of our sound. But I can't direct and do that at the same time. So I had somebody else come in and figure out which mics to use in what location, because we do have many options. And it turned out it happened to be the easiest option. We have 4 hanging mics in our sanctuary that pick up the congregation when they sing, when we were back in our singing days. And actually it turned out that was the best sounding for the bells. No choir mics, because otherwise it's uneven, and that just is even. And there's 4 separate controllers on them on my soundboard, so I know where they need to be set. We do have to play a little louder in general, but that's okay. So we just crescendo where we need to crescendo from where we started, at the softest point. So it's a little bit of an adjustment.
Awesome.
And this goes back to the first session, but I've done this a couple times. Our worship director plays violin, and I was maybe short a couple people on bells, but I've just had her play, it was a piece that lent itself well to her playing the melody line in on several verses. And then we didn't need that GABC, or maybe there was one note we needed to throw in somewhere, but other than that, we kind of got away without using like from E on up.
Yeah, COVID is forcing us to be creative in ways that we hadn't dreamt of before, and it's pretty cool to be able to latch onto some of that creativity and to share new ideas. Sometimes they're old ideas, but we haven't had to use them for a while because we didn't have this situation. So it's an interesting time for the instrument as well. Kind of as a pitch as well as an explanation, bell trees, as I said, is a passion. And next week there's a bell tree session that will be covering some of these things related more specifically to bell trees. But we've been seeing an increase in bell tree usage because it's a way for people to reintroduce bells into the congregation, into the worship setting without having a bunch of ringers there. And so we'll be looking at that as a way to help. And we're seeing more bell tree music written, etc. So it's an exciting time for that aspect of our instrument as well. And for those of us who are passionate about bell trees, it's pretty cool to be seeing some new music coming in and how that can help with getting bells back in service, worship service. I think we're going to end early, and I left the ending sort of open so that if anybody wanted to hang around and visit, we can certainly do that. If there's specific questions that you have or thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share, we don't need to close this down anytime in any specific time. So as long as you guys hang out, I'll hang out. But as they start to drop, I just want to say thank you for spending time with me today. I hope that you found some nuggets that you can use, and that hopefully you all can, if you haven't gotten back to ringing, you can soon. And if you are ringing, and hopefully something is helpful to help you think of another way to do something and inspire you to move forward with bells. I think the world will be a sad place if we can't ring. It's bad enough we can't sing, but this is a time where bells can help with healing and moving forward with the world. So ring on.